Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a jaw-dropping story, one that connects the dusty plains of West Africa to the corridors of power in Washington. We're exploring the claim, the world's largest gold discovery under Burkina Faso, to the tune of $3 trillion, and how France might already have known about it. You may be thinking, $3 trillion? That's an absurd figure. But what if there is more behind the hype? Hidden resources, geopolitical positioning, old colonial networks, strategic maneuvers in Africa, and great power competition involving the United States and France. Over the next half hour, or more, I'll take you into a deep dive, first into what's happening in Africa, especially Burkina Faso, then in the US. Then we'll compare and contrast, and finally bring everything together with the implications. I promise you, this is not just a mining story, it's about power, sovereignty, influence, and the future of Africa and global governance. So settle in, and let's begin. Let me begin by cautioning, as of my latest research, I found no credible source confirming a $3 trillion gold discovery in Burkina Faso, but that claim apparently circulates in social media, analysis outlets, or speculative narratives. What is true is that Burkina Faso is in the midst of a transformation in its gold sector, rethinking mining contracts, nationalizing assets, and asserting more sovereignty. It also has enormous untapped potential in its geology, and that's where rumors of trillions often come from. So in this video, I'll examine the mining sector of Burkina Faso, what is real, what's speculative, what's new, explore the geopolitical context, France's role, former colonial ties, and how Western powers have long had stakes. Move to the United States, other strategic priorities in Africa, mineral security, diplomacy, and how U.S. politics might play a role. Compare the two theaters, Africa versus U.S., conclude with what this could mean, cautions, opportunities, and what to watch going forward. Let's start with Africa, Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is one of the more mineral-rich countries in West Africa. Over the past decade, gold has become the backbone of its export economy. It is currently, as of recent years, Africa's fourth largest gold producer. Mining, both industrial and artisanal, drives much of its growth, and gold is pervasive, found across many regions. Some of the key mines include Escane. This is the largest producing mine in Burkina Faso. Houndé copyright, a majority owned by Endeavour Mining, with 10% government share. Sanbrado, Mana, Wanyan, Bli, and others make up the broader portfolio. Kayak is a rising project. It is estimated to hold 4.76 million ounces of gold in reserves as of mid-2024. One striking fact, Burkina Faso recently nationalized 5 gold mining assets, transferring them to its state-owned company, Sopimib. This is a significant assertion of control. The country also revised its mining code in 2023 to capture greater royalty and government interest in boom periods. But it's not all smooth sailing. In the first half of 2025, Escane reported a 28.7% decline in gold output, 181,000 ounces versus 254,000 prior. Lower ore grades are cited as the cause. Despite that, IAMGOLD, the operator, is holding to its annual target of 440,000 ounces. Also, IAMGOLD's equity stake was reduced to 85% in that mine. Burkina Faso now holds 15%. Furthermore, security challenges, particularly from Islamist insurgencies in the Sahel zone, are a constant drag and risk on operations. Some mines have had to shut or reduce activity because of security constraints. All this is to say, the gold potential is enormous, but there are hurdles. Now, where does the rumor of $3 trillion come from? Likely from speculative extrapolations, envisioning that under the ground there is a vast trove of gold that hasn't been discovered yet, or that the geology implies untapped reserves ripe for claim. Geologically, Burkina Faso sits atop the Birimian greenstone belts, which are classic gold-bearing formations in West Africa. These belts cover a substantial portion of the country, and many zones remain underexplored. Some projects like the Sanachura project are pushing exploration over large land spans. Thus, speculative narratives might say, if full potential is unlocked, trillions in value await. That said, I would treat $3 trillion as more rhetorical hyperbole than strictly credible, at least based on public data. Nevertheless, The claim captures attention, and maybe that's the point. But what is more credible and recent is this: Burkina Faso has been asserting sovereignty over its mining sector, seeking to diminish external control. For example, the nationalization of 5 gold assets, the increasing state share in existing mines, for example 15% stake in Escane, and revised mining laws, launching their own locally produced gold bars, which is symbolic of internal value capture, attempts to renegotiate or reclaim mining licenses from foreign companies. Now, what about France? Why the claim that France knew? To understand that, we must recall the colonial and post-colonial role of France in West Africa, particularly its former colonies such as Burkina Faso, formerly Upper Volta. For decades, France maintained deep ties, military bases, resource offtake agreements, economic influence, currency arrangements, for example CFA zone, though Burkina Faso exited the CFA in December 2023. Because of that historical entanglement, many in Burkina Faso see France as having privileged insight or influence into resource schemes, mining contracts, and underground potential. It's plausible that French geologists, ex-colonial administrations, or French mining interests have had reconnaissance or knowledge of favorable zones. Some conspiracy narratives suggest that France, and possibly international mining intermediaries, may have known exactly where to probe, while local populations remained in the dark. Whether that's true or not is harder to verify, but the narrative speaks to suspicion of neo-colonial control or extractive secrecy. In short, the rumor of a $3 trillion fine becomes a hook, but the truth is more nuanced. Burkina Faso is seizing control of gold assets, pushing for local beneficiation, and reshaping its mining relationships. Let me now shift to the United States side of things, because this is not just local drama. What does the U.S. do, or risk in all this? First, the U.S. is increasingly concerned about critical minerals and supply chain security. Gold is one part of that, but more broadly, rare earths, lithium, cobalt, and strategic minerals are top of mind. In Africa, the U.S. sees both competition, for example with China, Russia, and opportunity. The Trump administration's outreach to African countries indicates a desire to reassert U.S. presence on the continent. During his term, former President Trump invited leaders from several African nations to Washington in July 2025, showcasing a selective summit with hopes of advancing trade, investment, and mineral deals. Another arena is trade policy. The U.S. has long used the GATT, African Growth and Opportunity Act, to grant duty-free access to many African exports, but that pact is under threat. As of September 2025, GATT is expiring. The Trump administration has expressed openness to a one-year renewal, but at the same time, it has also introduced sweeping tariffs on imports, which could undercut African exports even under GATT. This policy pivot creates uncertainty and risk for African economies. Many African nations that depend on U.S. markets are now scrambling to adjust or renegotiate new trade frameworks. The U.S. also has a diplomatic footprint. It recently brokered a peace agreement between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda in 2025, the Washington Accord, aimed in part at stabilizing mineral zones in eastern Congo. That is a clear example of how Washington sees Africa as a site of geostrategic leverage, where control over or stability in mineral-rich regions matters. Also, unrest is ongoing in the DRC. For example, the January 2025 Kinshasa riots targeting embassies, which shows how volatile these zones can be. Domestically in the U.S., political narratives tie into mineral security, energy transition, and industrial resilience. The Biden or Trump administrations, depending on what you mean by current affairs, are acutely aware that access to critical minerals is no longer optional. It can underpin electric vehicles, defense systems, semiconductors, etc. Thus, ensuring or influencing access to African mineral zones is part of a broader strategic competition with China, Russia, EU. There's also tension around foreign aid, development policy, and conditionality. The U.S. can use military assistance, security cooperation, or development grants as levers to maintain influence in Africa, and if a country like Burkina Faso attempts to push France out or reorient towards non-Western allies, that may provoke response from Washington. Furthermore, the U.S. has been willing to limit or redirect aid or trade to countries with governance, human rights, or security issues, which gives Washington leverage. So in sum, from the American side, interest in critical minerals and supply chains, trade leverage via AGA and tariff policy, geopolitical influence diplomacy in Africa, leverage via aid, security partnerships, sanctions. Now, let's compare the two sides. Africa, Burkina Faso as emblematic, versus U.S. interests. On the African side, Burkina Faso. The country is trying to reclaim control of its mining sector, extracting more value domestically, and lessening dependency on foreign operators. It aims to capture more revenue, which is critical given security challenges, social demands, and limited alternative exports. It faces real operational risks, declining ore grades at major mines, security volatility, infrastructure constraints, and the burden of exploration risk. The narrative of a $3 trillion find is useful symbolism and frames the country as sitting on future wealth, perhaps justifying political claims and renegotiations. On the U.S. side, the U.S. doesn't necessarily want to directly operate all mines, but wants preferential access, partnerships, or favorable deals. It uses diplomatic tools, trade policy, and influence to shape how Africa's resources are integrated into global supply chains. It competes with other powers, China, Russia, European nations, in Africa's resource spheres. It has to balance governance demands, human rights, and public perception. U.S. support for extraction must pass scrutiny. In that tension lie many flashpoints. Will Burkina Faso ally with non-Western powers, Russia, China? Will it resist U.S. or Western influence? Will mining deals be transparent or opaque? Who controls the underground, and who gains from it? One more factor to consider is narrative and legitimacy. If local populations believe that previous mining deals were exploitative, or that foreign companies siphoned value abroad, then a nationalistic narrative of sovereignty, unlocking hidden potential, holds appeal. The France new narrative taps into that suspicion, that colonial powers or incumbent elites have had secret knowledge and advantage. Now, drawing this all together, what should we take away, and what to watch? First, approach the $3 trillion claim with skepticism, though not dismissiveness. It is likely an overstatement or a rhetorical flourish, but it signals real belief in underexplored potential. Geology supports that Burkina Faso is rich, but turning that potential into actual value requires investment, security, infrastructure, and institutional governance. Second, the shift toward nationalization, renegotiation, and local value capture is real, ongoing, and dangerous for incumbent foreign companies. Burkina Faso is not alone across Africa. Many nations are seeking stronger terms, more equity, and a larger footprint in mining. For foreign investors, that means political risk is rising. Third, great powers will continue competing in Africa not just via mining, but trade, diplomacy, security alliances, infrastructure, and soft power. The U.S. can't be passive. It must offer credible incentives or partnerships, but also must manage the optics of extraction and fairness. Otherwise, African states will gravitate to whoever offers better deals, whether China, Russia, or other blocs. Fourth, for watchers and analysts, key indicators to monitor include official geological surveys or new discoveries announced by Burkina Faso or Africa-wide, auctioning or licensing rounds, transparency of mining contracts, changes in foreign company shares or exits, U.S. involvement in trade pacts, mineral diplomacy, and infrastructure investments, security developments, insurgencies, stability that affect mine viability, public sentiment, protests, or social backlash over mining or resource deals. In conclusion, the narrative of world's largest gold discovery under Burkina Faso is powerful, but it is more myth than verifiable fact, at least for now. However, it speaks to deeper realities, vast resource potential, ongoing struggles over who controls natural wealth, and the intersection of sovereignty, geopolitics, and capital. This is not just a story about gold. It is a lens into Africa's sovereignty on the world stage, and the recalibration of power between local actors and global powers. As Burkina Faso and other African states push to assert themselves, the U.S., France, and others will have to adjust their strategies or risk being sidelined. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe the $3 trillion claim? Do you think Burkina Faso can fully control its mining future? And don't forget to subscribe. In future videos, we can drill deeper into specific countries, mining deals, or U.S.A. Africa Strategic Competition. Thanks for watching and until next